Is the Duchess of York Epstein scandal about to hit her in the pocket? Well, maybe. Let me explain why. The charities linked to Sarah Ferguson on Monday certainly moved quickly to distance themselves from her.
She was never the fairy tale duchess the palace hoped for. Sarah Ferguson entered royal life with laughter, charm, and chaos, and she left it in scandal, disgrace, and exile. Now, as the former Duchess of York faces a new chapter without the man she once called her best friend, old stories have resurfaced. Stories that paint a picture of betrayal, loneliness, and one American man who would change everything. Before the toe-sucking photographs, before the exile, and long before her so-called redemption, there was another affair, one that began while she was still pregnant with Princess Eugenie. This is the story of how a woman who never quite fit in became one of the most scandalous figures in modern royal history. When Sarah Ferguson married Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor on July 23, 1986, many saw it less as a love story and more as royal damage control.
The happiest divorced couple, as they describe themselves. She describes herself as being divorced to rather than divorced from him. I've heard her say on multiple occasions what a kind man he is, what a good father, what a good grandfather. But I think what's controversial in these comments is what she says about him being able to come out of the spotlight and get on with his life.
Charles and Diana's marriage was already faltering, and the palace needed a distraction, something young, lively and camera-friendly. Fergie fit the bill, loud, enthusiastic, and strikingly unroyal. The press liked her, at first. The Queen's courtiers didn't. Almost immediately, tensions began to form. Her jokes were too informal, her style too brash, and her appetite for attention too large for the institution that demanded restraint. Still, she threw herself into royal life, presenting herself as the cheerful modern duchess. She and Andrew welcomed Princess Beatrice in 1988, and 2 years later, Princess Eugenie. But behind the smiling photographs, the marriage was already breaking. Andrew's naval duties meant he was gone most of the year. Fergie later admitted she spent months alone, forbidden by Prince Philip to accompany her husband to his postings. Her quote says it all. "I married the man, but what I got was the palace."
Ready to go skiing.
Sad day for you?
Well, I would say that was the understatement. Yeah, very sad. Of course it's sad. Anyway, you're all going to leave us alone then today, now? Please?
By her own admission, she saw Andrew for just 40 days a year, and in those long absences, the loneliness began to take its toll. The palace expected her to behave like a dutiful officer's wife, quiet, obedient and invisible. But Sarah had never been any of those things. In 1989, Fergie travelled to the United States to attend the Houston Grand Opera's British Opera Festival. It was there she met Steve Wyatt, a wealthy, charming Texan businessman with confidence, warmth, and an interest in the Duchess that went beyond polite small talk. He wasn't intimidated by her royal status. He was, as one biographer put it, attentive, affectionate, and exactly what she needed at that moment. They clicked instantly, and according to multiple sources, their connection turned romantic, even as she carried her second child, Princess Eugenie.
I can have someone a patron for charities that are helping children, and this patron is openly friends with a known paedophile, and she knew he was a paedophile by that point. Makes me want to vomit.
I mean, there are certain things you can recover from, JJ, right? We had a prince that was involved in tampon gate, right?
For a woman who felt abandoned by her husband, this wasn't just temptation, it was escape. By the early 1990s, rumours about Sarah's relationship with Wyatt were circulating in Fleet Street. He was spotted at royal-adjacent events. He'd flown to London under discreet arrangements. But everything exploded in January 1992, when photos of Wyatt with a toddler-aged Princess Beatrice surfaced in newspapers. The message was unmistakable. Sarah Ferguson had introduced her daughter to her lover. For the palace, that crossed every line imaginable. Biographer David Lee later wrote that Steve Wyatt was the love of her life, and that the affair was the real reason her marriage collapsed.
This barrel's for me.
Toe-sucking. Who was this and just why?
It's 1992. Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, and Prince Andrew had been divorced for a few months, and Fergie rents a place in the south of France as she took her financial advisor, John Bryan, with her.
When asked about him years later, friends of Fergie claimed she never truly got over the relationship. 2 months after those photos made headlines, Sarah and Andrew announced their separation. It should have ended there, quiet, civil, contained. But the summer of 1992 brought an even bigger disaster. While holidaying in the south of France, the Duchess was photographed topless beside another American man, her financial advisor, John Bryan, as he kissed and sucked her toes by the pool. The images were printed across the world. The royal family was mortified. The Queen was reportedly devastated. Prince Philip wrote to her personally, saying, "You have done more to bring shame on this family than could ever have been imagined." The damage was irreversible. Sarah Ferguson had become a national punchline and an international embarrassment. By 1993, her reputation was beyond repair.
It's after on Sunday we saw that email she'd sent to convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, which appeared to be a grovelling apology to him. She said she had to write it because she was being threatened by Jeffrey Epstein.
Negotiations for a formal separation were underway, and by 1996 the marriage was over. She received a modest settlement compared to her peers, just over £3 million, a fraction of what Diana would later receive. Yet despite everything, Sarah and Andrew maintained an unusually close friendship. They continued to share Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, co-parented their daughters, and even holidayed together. Sarah often described them as the happiest divorced couple in the world. It was an arrangement that suited them both, it appears, until recently. Decades later, the same couple, once mocked by the press for being too casual, too chaotic, and too scandal-ridden, are again at the centre of controversy.
Not only that, but a pap found them and took photos of Brian sucking Fergie's toes, Fergie topless, and all of this happening while her two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, were around. It was an absolute sensation.
Following Andrew's catastrophic association with Jeffrey Epstein and his subsequent removal from royal duties and titles, the pair's long coexistence at Royal Lodge has reportedly come to an end. They're said to be going their separate ways at last, after nearly 2 decades living under the same roof. For Sarah, this marks the end of a strange royal chapter, one that began in glamour, spiralled into scandal, and ended in quiet survival. Sarah Ferguson has always been a contradiction. At times, she's the comic relief of the monarchy, clumsy, emotional, impossible to manage. At others, she's the cautionary tale, the woman who proved that charisma without discipline can destroy you. She courted attention when she shouldn't. She trusted people she shouldn't. And in a world where every misstep becomes a headline, she gave her critics endless material. But what made her downfall so compelling is that she never pretended otherwise.
They are extremely damaging, and there'll be many who think, well, who are you to say you should just be allowed to get on with your life?
And also the question is, what kind of life is he or does she envisage his getting on with? Because obviously he can't get on with life as a member of the royal family and working royal.
She was messy, she was chaotic, and she was brutally unroyal. She once said she married into a cage of gold, and when the doors finally opened, she didn't know how to act free. Every attempt at independence, whether business deals, book contracts, or friendships, seemed to end in scandal. She was mocked by tabloids, rejected by courtiers, and ridiculed on late-night television. Yet somehow she endured, and decades later, she still continued her attempts to make money from her status, writing books, speaking publicly. But knowing what we know now, the affair, the humiliation, and the exile remain the defining chapters of her story, and they were only the beginning. Today, Sarah Ferguson is something rare, a royal exile who refuses to disappear. She still calls herself a supporter of the monarchy. She still speaks warmly of the Queen, and fiercely of her daughters. But the truth is, her place in royal history is sealed, as a reminder of what happens when emotion meets institution, and when personal weakness becomes public spectacle. Her affair with Steve Wyatt didn't just destroy her marriage, it cemented her reputation. And, it would appear now, the affair perfectly demonstrated her true character, her ability to deceive, to lack accountability, and do whatever she pleases, simply because she can. To the palace, she'll always be the Duchess who embarrassed them. To the public, she's the woman who couldn't stop talking, and couldn't stop falling apart. Decades later, Sarah Ferguson's reputation hasn't improved much. Her name continues to surface in connection with questionable ventures, dubious associates, and reckless financial decisions. From her stint as brand ambassador for a failed Bitcoin firm accused of misleading investors, to endless tabloid reports about money troubles and desperate publicity stunts, it's clear that controversy has remained her constant companion. Insiders claim the former Duchess has quietly begun planning an exit from the UK, perhaps to escape the scrutiny that now surrounds both her and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Talk of new business deals abroad and luxury properties overseas has only added to speculation that she's preparing to reinvent herself once again, this time far from Windsor's watchful eyes. But if history tells us anything, it's that Sarah Ferguson rarely leaves scandal behind. She takes it with her. For years, she's blamed loneliness, the press, and royal pressure for her downfall. But at some point, the pattern becomes too obvious to ignore. Time and again, she's chosen attention over discretion, risk over reason, and short-term gain over long-term respectability. Whatever sympathy she once commanded has long evaporated. Even within royal circles, few now see her as the great survivor she likes to portray. So what do you think? Is Sarah Ferguson simply unlucky, or is she the architect of her own repeated disgrace? Should she finally walk away from the UK, or is this just another act in a decades-long performance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more royal exposés that pull back the curtain on Britain's most controversial family.